had a rare visit from an old friend, Kerryanne Ansari from Australia. She's been initiated into a Native American tradition by a Native American medicine man. We had a great conversation. Join us. So, Kerryanne, amazing to have you here. I cannot actually believe after all these years. I mean, I think we've known each other just about 20 years, close on 20 years. So welcome to Cape Town in Africa, your spiritual home, and here to my little world on TV. So the first thing that I want to just remind you of, not that you really have forgotten, but we actually met kind of indirectly when your teacher and mentor came to South Africa, I think probably for the first time at that time, nearly 20 years ago, and that was John Two Birds. And one of the things that, John Two Birds was a Native American teacher, shaman. How would you describe him?
He really feels very clearly that shamans, that's the title for those in South America, and that he's a medicine man or medicine man, medicine woman.
So, the Native American, first American peoples, medicine man, very powerful medicine man, as anyone who's met him would attest, and I can certainly do so. How is it that essentially as a white woman from Australia, you landed up married to a Native American medicine man from, from America? So how did that happen?
Look, I'd dreamt about him long before I met him, not that I had any frame of reference for that. And I had been very much praying to Spirit for a teacher, because I had a lot of, our word is medicine, a lot of things happening in my life that I didn't really always understand or have a context for or a way to frame. And here in Africa, you're really lucky that there are those lineages of medicine people that have passed on that oral tradition, that medicine gift from family to family or person to person. Being a white person in Australia, we don't have really access to that. So if I had have met, an Aboriginal elder, for example, and I felt called to work with them, I would have, but that didn't happen. So for me, it wasn't so much about where he came from, it was more about his teachings. And how did I meet him? I met other apprentices of his, and what I really liked about them, and I'd been to lots of workshops. I think we do a lot of exploration. I went to Reiki, I went to crystals, and I'm a homeopath. I was always looking at alternative.
So you already were professionally a homeopath once you met him? Yeah.
So I was looking for an earth-based, religion, but it didn't make sense to me, the whole patriarchal system. And also that there was this idea that you had to ascend to something, that you had to, being physical in the body wasn't actually okay, and I just could never quite get on board with that. So
you mean like regular spiritual things mean that never happens in this body?
Yes.
After you've died and all those
yes, and whether it's the original sin or you're going to ascend to nirvana or whatever it is, there wasn't this acknowledgement that this earth, this body, this time now was just as important, just as spiritual, if you like.
That's really interesting, because I think that's also quite an African idea. It's very much, spirituality is very much about now. It's not about the future, or yes, the ancestors and the past are important, but it's really about you here now.
And so because I'd had, my mother's psychic, my grandmother's psychic, my great-grandmother, apparently we've got a long lineage. And I know that when my grandmother was coming into her medicine, because I think from my experience anyway in the West, I have a lot of people who say, yes, all of this things start to happen. There seems to be these periods where people's medicine starts to activate, whether they're consciously doing it or not. It seems to be an automatic thing that starts to awaken. And then there's people that go actively trying to do that. And there's no, for us in Western countries mostly, we don't know what to do with that. And so I really wanted a teacher because I wanted some kind of reference for it. And I'd looked at lots of different people, and there were a lot of guru types, and it was about sort of bowing down to somebody, and that didn't quite resonate with me either. I met his apprentices. I went into lodge, I went into ceremony, I went into drum and chanting. I listened to their world cosmology and worldview. And what I liked about them was that they walked their talk, and so it wasn't about, oh, we're doing this great workshop, let's go and do something else that's completely opposite to what we stand for. So because they were walking their talk, and because they had a lot of information of things I'd experienced but no one else was talking about, I thought there's something in these people. And so I spent time with those apprentices in Australia, and then
and you hadn't met John Tubert himself yet. These were just really his people.
His apprentices, yeah. And, you know, they were talking about different life forms. They were talking about, you know, that the monotheistic worldview was a very narrow point of view, and that wasn't necessarily how, you know, First Nation people saw that, and, you know, really questioned my way of viewing the world. And I always knew that Christianity wasn't for me, but, you know, we're kind of offered the dark or the light. There's nothing in between.
Right.
And for me, that fulcrum of saying the light and the dark are both relevant, but it's how do we keep it in balance?
That is such a powerful thing, I think, that you've said. Because I know that there are a lot of people watching this now who've just realized that's exactly what their problem is. Mm. That the problem is that in most Western culture, there's this choice of dark and light. And like anything else that's got two extremes, it doesn't match the reality of the human experience.
And there's a judgment about the dark.
Right.
Which I always find very interesting, because yes, there's evil that exists in the world, there's terrible things, but the dark is also the feminine, the fecund, the moist, the infinite womb, the darkness, you know, and the honouring of the feminine and the honouring of the life giver. And all we're seeing is the honouring of the father, or the, you know, the masculine. And so here are all these people, and I remembered them, and there was this deep knowing that this was my way. And, you know, John himself said, yes, I'm Choctaw, I'm Ojibwe, yes, I've trained with Native people, yes, that's my heritage, but this isn't about who I am as a Native American, this is about the way of spirit. And the way of spirit runs through all cultures. And it's about living in harmony with the earth.
So then when did you actually meet John? I mean, did you go back to America with these women?
They talked about this elder that was very sick, and that in fact he was dying, and that he'd had vision about a ceremony coming, and that there would be 7 women from different parts of the world with different medicine that would come together, and they would actually about heal him. And that these women had, you know, journeyed with him before, and that they would know who they are. And I was like, oh, you know, this is all very interesting. You know, I'd done Reiki, you know, I wasn't, you know, naive to different kinds of medicine, but the idea of someone trusting their dreaming and their vision that clearly, that they disseminated that in the world, and also introduced to people that have no idea what you're talking about. I was like, that's pretty amazing, you know. And the voice sort of said to me, oh, what if you're one of those women? And I went, oh, no. And I started dreaming, and it was just rising in me. And then I was remembering dreams I'd had even before I'd heard of him. And I started to connect some of those signs that I'd had in the dreams. I dreamt of these 2 birds. I dreamt of a Native American elder in traditional dress. You know, there was all these other dreams, and then I started to connect the dots. And so I spoke to him on the phone. They said, well, you know, do you want to talk to him? I said, oh, that's probably a good idea. And but I remembered him. I don't know how to describe that other than I remembered his voice. I remembered him. From the moment I spoke to him, I recognised him. I remembered those women. It was actually the women that called me rather than John in terms of wanting to be part of it. These were strong women. There was just this sense of this is where I need to be, you know, this is right. And then I met John, I went, oh no, hold on. And he wasn't this gorgeous Native American guy on a horse with the long hair and the six pack. He was.
He was a real person, an older man. He
was gravely ill. His aura was, if you've ever seen someone that's about to die, there's a particular shade and colour that happens. Some people see in colours, some people see in density. And I was like, that man's he's dying. You could see it. And he was ashen. He was almost greeny grey. So I just started to trust my intuition. I decided to jump off the cliff, really. I just decided to, this is right, I'm just going to do it.
And then basically your apprenticeship started?
It started immediately, yes. And we had to go into ceremony to save him, so that happened within a very short period of time of us being there. This is not part of my normal...
Basically thrown straight into the deep end, into chanting and drumming.
Knowing that if you don't actually do it properly, this man will die.
It's consequential,
yes. No pressure. And to see the man the next day, this man that was on death's door, and hardly able to, walk even. He was, struggling with the pain in his body. The cancer was right through him. And the next day, it was like a completely different human being.
So then you learnt essentially what he taught you, medicine ways.
He had been trained from birth to walk in a traditional medicine way. This was no, average training. And so when he got this vision about, he quested, and quest is, 4 days, 4 nights, no sleep, no water. You're in prayer and chant, and you're out in nature just with a fire. The mother told him that he needed to, and I call the mother, you can talk about the grandmother earth and the spirit of her, but also the great mother, that feminine life force throughout this universe. The great mother came to him and said, you need to walk with 1 foot in the red world and 1 foot in the white world, and you need to train white people. And he himself was a bit resistant about that idea.
I'm sure he was. But he would have known that that's not going to go down very easily.
No.
And the one thing, I know that it's true for John Two Birds, was that obviously it caused a lot of controversy. But I know that apart from him, that is one of the issues that people in Native American communities spoke about in the 70s, 80s, 90s as white people were getting interested. And it seems, when I look at the history, that there becomes this controversy about people who are teaching outsiders the native ways. And there's a lot of division about, is it appropriate to give the ways to people from other cultures? I was fascinated by that because I'm a white Sangoma. We have white Sangomas in this country. And sometimes that issue raises its head as well. How is it that people from another culture can have anything to do with that? So have you faced that kind of challenge yourself, and do you have an answer? How do people from another culture fit in?
I think it's quite complex. John really kept us out of the politics. He didn't live on a reservation. He'd left because there was so much politics. But, his thing was, if the Great Mother comes and tells me that's what I need to do, if I go to Quest and I pray and I, in all my, humility, I'm told that's what I need to do, who am I to argue with that? That's a vision.
That's true.
He was also very clear that, when the white buffalo woman or the white deer woman or the white calf woman, the Great Mother manifested in that animal form to talk to the people, she said, you need to give pipe, you need to give lodge to the people. You need to remind them that they are part of spirit, that they are not...
So pipe and lodge are traditional Native American forms of ceremony.
Yeah. And, the pipe is an instrument of focus and connection. It is a representation of the cosmology as well, of the masculine, the feminine, of creation, of the mystery, and those prayers go into spirit. It's a sacred tool, but it is a tool, but she didn't say, give pipe to the red people. She said, give it to the people and to remind them of who they are. And he said, that's what I'm doing. You are also the people, and if anyone needs help, you do. And it was a proper apprenticeship. There was no padding of anything. I had to follow him wherever he went. I had to sit at his knee. I had to learn the songs. There was no books or writing down or anything like that. It was oral, you know. And as an elder, I had to watch everything he did. I had to do whatever he asked of me. And I had to have the patience and respect when my mind went no, because of whatever, whether it's ego or not lacking of understanding, of having the discretion to say I can trust and wait to see how this pans out. So, you know, I followed him all over the world for a very long time to learn those ways. And so for me, if I'm willing, which is what he said, if someone is willing to actually do the apprenticeship, to do the training, then who am I to deny them?
You know, there's so much resonance that I have with how we've experienced sangomas and white sangomas in this country. And that, you know, I think critical, what you're referring to, which we do see here, is that in Western cultures, white people's cultures, we long ago lost any other access except that black and white religious way. And so in terms of people and their connection to spirit and their responsibility to each other, to love, to communities, all of those which were kind of taken away by authoritarian systems. The fact is that our white people's cultures don't have that stuff. I've spoken to black African sangomas about why is it that white people get called. And that's what they've told me. They've said, basically, you've forgotten all your ways. We're left here to teach you. So you're not us, and we might even understand the language, but we know that it works, and we know that it will heal you, and we know that it will get you there. So for you as the apprentice and the apprentices, was it then also a healing process for yourself?
It was huge. You know, John basically said to me, I'm not here to teach you what you know, I'm here to teach what you don't know. And I don't know what you feel your process as a Twaza was, or what you've witnessed in the people that you've trained, but for me, I always felt like it was a complete dissolution of what I thought I knew. And you can struggle against that.
Yeah.
You can fight that, or you can just accept that what you thought you knew actually isn't necessarily what's real.
Whether it's Sangomas or Native Americans, one of when people criticize you teaching the other culture, as much as all these methods are cultural, the bottom line is that the human beings, whatever their culture may be, know this, do this, need this. And there is a spiritual reality. So we might have a whole bunch of cultural ways to recognize it, but that person is manifesting a spiritual calling. And that's the bottom line. And that's when people criticize, I know here, when black Sangoma teachers get criticized for teaching white people, the critic doesn't understand that this isn't just like a cultural play. That if there's something real, the color of your skin then becomes irrelevant because it doesn't arise out of your culture. It arises out of your humanity. Your culture just might have methods to deal with it. And if it doesn't, you're going to have to go to someone else's culture. But the spiritual calling arises out of your humanity. A lot of people don't recognize that they do need a mentor. You can't do it from books, from the internet, on your own.
For me, there was a calling and a need. And I had never been particularly interested in Native American spirituality. There were a few things that I'd resonated with very deeply because of their absolute love of and respect for creation and, you know, honouring a life before they took it in terms of eating their food and things like that. But for me, the Great Mother brought me to him and vice versa. There was a deeper calling that you need this man because you need to understand the gifts that you carry and how to walk with them with discretion and discernment. And he needs you because you're part of this puzzle, you know. And exactly. So I would still, in certain circles, the fact that I carried a pipe, if I was around First Nation people, depending on who they were, of course, would have real issue with it. And once they spoke to me, once they understood the depth of my training, once they felt me, I would imagine, they would know that I'm the genuine article. But still, there's a lot of disenfranchisement. There's a lot of people that haven't had connection to their own elders that are Native American.
I've travelled in Native American reservations, and I can see that.
And so then there's an anger, because how come you got that and they didn't? And of course I understand that they've been completely and systematically...
Yeah, they've been oppressed and deculturalized, if that's a word, in every way.
Exactly. And so, but for me, John said, I will train anyone that comes to me and offers me tobacco, and that is signed. So even me, I couldn't just go and say to him, oh yes, can you teach me? He would go and pray, he would go to pipe, he would go to spirit. Is this something that has to happen?
Again, I think that's the key point with African, is that ultimately it is spirit that is guiding the process. It's not a person who is breaking his culture's rules or deciding, I want these white people or those green people. It's actually, the origin is spirit itself, and that's where people need to realize, if we're going to do anything for this world, we must stop poking each other with our cultures, and discover our humanity through those cultures. So then let me ask you this last question. The apprenticing, at the time he also needed healing, that was step one. Step two then starts the apprenticeship. What is the ultimate purpose? Did this make you a healer? What is then your role now that you have graduated as essentially a Native American Sangoma?
Well, obviously everyone has their own medicine, and so his job was to bring that to the surface. Initially it was to hold space. So how do you hold a sacred circle? How do you hold sacred space? How do you protect people that are in your care in terms of in ceremony or in healing? I came in probably as a healer and as a psychic, and so there was aspects of, as a healing woman, things that I was taught. But again, it was under his guidance, but he was always, you go to pipe, you go to pray to spirit, you go and ask what it is that you're here to do. Yeah, I will teach you how to hold ceremony, I will teach you the protocols, I will teach you how to pour lodge, how to build a fire, how to feed a group of people, how to get along, because for him it was all, if we don't get along, there's no hope.
Well, that's spoken like a true teacher.
Yes.
So now years have gone by, and I know John has since passed into the spirit world, and you're living home in Australia. Do you work as a healer and a psychic?
I do. I work as a teacher because I'm a teacher, but I also do readings, and I also do healings, and I run sweat lodges and drum and chant circles, but I also use art therapy. So when you've not been in a medicine environment or a traditional environment, often I find I need to have subtle ways for people to connect with their own guidance and to connect with their own spirit and to connect to that sacred self within that knows what they need to be doing, but they've never learned to communicate with it in a way that's real for them. And so for me, it's how can I introduce it into a way that you feel safe, that you know that this is your own authenticity, this is your spirit calling you to where you need to be, and that I can hold a safe container for you so that, yes, you can come to a healing and know. And I'm very clear if I teach songs and I tell them, ask, what is that song? What am I calling on? Don't just trust someone because they say they are something. Yeah, right. Ask them who trained them. What does the song mean? What am I calling? What am I doing? When they come into ceremony, we go through the whole protocol. We explain exactly how it's supposed to be and why that's supposed to be that way. And we keep people if you come to ceremony, you need to actually adhere to these sacred laws. So for me, it's how can I bring people to the relationship with themselves, and how can I help them to come into their relationship with spirit and creation, because it's a living relationship. It's, you're very lucky here in Africa. You're very lucky.
We are. I always say one of the great ironies of apartheid is that it ended up inadvertently preserving the spiritual traditions by not allowing people to mix. And now the holders of those traditions are able to share them unselfishly, amazingly. with the people who actually created that oppression in the first place.
I'm glad that there's these intermediaries, because we need, from our white perspective, and really underneath this skin we're the same, we're the bridges. And those bridges are really vital, especially now. We are the bridges because we understand where we've come from in terms of our training and our calling, but you also understand how we need to meet the people who have no frame of reference for that, and how we can, be those bridges. And for me now, with Standing Rock and all of those native people coming together from all over the world and from all different corners of, Turtle Island, this is the time, this is the bridging time. We've got to come together.
Now is the time.
Now is the time.
Next week, can you believe it's already time for the month ahead, for January, and the year ahead for the whole of the year will be broadcast during January, so make sure to look out for that in the middle of January. If you have any questions, get me at the usual place. I'll see you next week right here.